So yes, it makes it different. People don't like the fan spinning in the background.
All
Yeah,
right.
Gotcha.
I was eating dinner last night, so I didn't want to be on camera.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Ken. We're officially live on Facebook and LinkedIn. My name is Monica. I'm the membership and inclusion specialist for Palm Beach Tech. And we're going to go ahead and get started with a quick presentation, and then I can introduce our speaker, Todd. So real quick, let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen okay? Yeah, we're good. Awesome. Well, let me just present. All right. So this is our speaker for today, Todd Albert. He's a founder and lead instructor at Boca Code. He's been an awesome member of our South Florida tech community and just a great person to have around and to really get to know. We're actually the Palm Beach Tech Association. So our goal is to build South Florida into a tech hub. And we do so by creating a community of awesome people, technologists, and just people that want to give back to the community, and by providing you guys with all the resources that we can, from, the big CEOs and the executives all the way down to the students at our Palm Beach Code School program that we have, and also everyone else in between. We offer workshops, we offer podcasts, community coffees, just for you guys to network, build your knowledge, and simply connect with each other. All right, and these are just a few of our current members. We have Office Depot, Modernizing Medicine, Boca Code, Florida Crystals. So we have a wide range of technology companies all throughout South Florida. And Boca Code's actually circled at the bottom. Todd, did he do
It
that?
was.
Wow, I didn't even know you could do that. All right. So these are just a few of the weekly events that we offer. Every Monday we have our tech talks, and we just added a new networking feature where you come 30 minutes early and meet some of the local people in our community. Then we have our podcasts every Wednesdays, our community coffees every Tuesdays at 8 a.m. Those are really interesting. We bring in panelists and we discuss certain things. And every month we do a diversity and inclusion panel. And then today we actually have our workshop. So every Friday at 10 a.m. we have our workshop, and today Todd's leading it. And then we have our annual hackathon coming up in October, and I will gladly share some more information in the chat about this and how to register. And this is just a few of our membership benefits. So we have our weekly newsletter, we have our private member portal where we share information just for our members. We give our members speaking opportunities, exclusive peer groups. We have about 8 peer groups at the moment, and job listings and resume distributions. All right, so if you haven't done so already, please join our Slack channel at southfloridatech.com/Slack. And if you want to be on our newsletter, please just text your email to 561-250-7206. All right, so thank you, everybody. I'm going to hand over the mic to Todd, and I look forward to hearing what you have to offer today, Todd.
All right. Well, thank you, South Florida Tech or Palm Beach Tech Association, whichever name you guys are going by today, for sponsoring this, and for Boca Code for sponsoring this. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Dr. Todd Albert. I'm the lead instructor and founder or one of the lead instructors and the founder at Boca Code. And you could catch me anytime, todd@bocacode.com. I encourage you guys to check out our website, bocacode.com. You could join our Slack with a single click. Also, as Monica mentioned, the South Florida Tech Slack channel is also a really great group. And if you're getting into tech, whether you're in tech or getting into tech, those are 2 great resources for you, the Boca Code Slack, South Florida Tech Slack. Also join us on Meetup and Eventbrite and all these places, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So today the title of the talk was "What programming language should I learn?" And I realized I think it's better English if it's "Which programming language should I learn?" And then I put languages in parentheses because sometimes it may be more than one language that's right for you. So the short answer to that question, of course, is it depends, right? It depends. What are your goals? What are you trying to get out of it? What are you trying to do with it? But I do have some suggestions and guidance, obviously, otherwise this talk would be over, right? So the first thing to really consider are your goals. And I oftentimes will talk to people who, sorry, I'm just bringing up the chat. So if anybody has questions, please, feel free to come off mute, or jump, throw something in chat if you don't want to come off of mute. But I'll try and keep an eye on that, at least in our Zoom call. So if Monica, hopefully you're watching the social channels for me. So I talk to a lot of people who, they want to learn how to code because they want to be a game developer, or because they want to, do something else very technical with it. And that's great. Having those goals, those long-term goals, is really important, but also consider your short-term goals, right? If you want to be a really successful game developer and be one of the programmers on a game development team, you want to be a really solid coder first, right? If that's the area of game development you want to get into. So that's something maybe you should study and research and realize that not all game developers write code or write a lot of code. But if, think about where your long-term goals are, where you want to eventually be, but then what are some of the short-term goals to get you there? So how do you become a solid programmer? Maybe there's something simpler. You could program like a website and learn that skill before you try building out a mobile application or building out a desktop application or a game. So keep that in mind, that your goals may be your eventually goals, but then you also, what are you trying to do now? So I also talk to people who, oh, I've got an idea for a mobile app I want to build. Well, that's great. That's exciting, but maybe you should learn how to code first, right? Code something simple and then build out your app. Or, are you independently wealthy so that you can just sit at home? You're just sitting at home twiddling your thumbs now, and so you want to be building an app instead. That's great, good for you. But for most of us, the goal would probably be learn how to code so you can get a job, and then while you're working full time, at nights and weekends and in your spare time, you can build your app. So keep that in mind. What are your goals, eventually and now in the short term? And then if your goal is, at least in the short term, to get a job locally so you can be, paying the bills while you're building your, billion-dollar unicorn app, is look at the skills that are needed in the local community. And so, Monica and Nikki and I serve on these committees, these tech talent committees. We just had one this morning, and a lot of it is focused on what are the skills that are needed here in South Florida that people are lacking, where you can make yourself more in demand. So researching that, looking at job postings, and filter those job postings. If you're just learning how to code, filter those job postings for the lower end positions, the entry level positions. Because if you're looking at what's needed at the senior level, you're not going to learn to code and become a senior developer. You're going to learn to code and become a junior developer. So look at those positions, those entry level positions, and see what they're looking for, and guide, see where you're finding most of them are looking. And so, not only what technologies we're using in the local market, but what technologies are in demand in the local market that aren't being filled. So another thing to consider is there's a lot of different types of developers. You've got, as I mentioned, you have game developers there at the top, and working our way counterclockwise from the least common to the most common is, whoops, sorry, hang on, I'm gonna screw this whole thing up. There we go. From the least common to the most common, from game development to QA to data analytics and machine learning, which is growing really fast. It's an area that's just exploding. Leonard, could you maybe mute yourself real quick? Because we're getting a lot of background noise. There's embedded systems, database DevOps, mobile developers. You could see mobile developers are actually just a sliver of the whole pie, right? People who develop desktop apps, and then the whole rest of this pie, from here over, this is all web development, right? Front end, back end, and full stack that do both front end and back end. And so the big chunk of the pie are web developers. That's what most developers are doing, is web. If you're looking to specifically go into data analytics or machine learning, the absolute best place to start is Python. That is the absolute number one language to learn if your goal is to know data analytics or do machine learning. If that's where you want to start, and that's where you want your career to be focused, learn Python. And Python is actually fairly easy to learn. And the tools that are available now, you can do these build out complex machine learning AI models that were completely inaccessible in the past, and now are it's like writing an Excel formula. It's that easy. So it's a really, really good place to start. And Monica just said she needs to learn Python. Monica, I hope you know that in 8 days, we're teaching over the weekend, October 10th and 11th, we're teaching a data analytics in Python short course. So it's a weekend crash course. If you want in, we still have open slots. Okay. So check us out on Boca Code. And Ashley is saying that she thinks you'll also learn love the UX course, which starts the following week. So those 2 courses we have coming up, and they're a great place to start. So if you really want to get into this machine learning, data analytics, check out that course. It starts a week from tomorrow. So we're filling up fast. So grab a slot now. If your passion is game development, C# is the best answer for game development. C# is the way to go. C# is not as easy to learn as Python. So if that's why I was saying earlier, if eventually you want to get into game development, you might want to start somewhere else. You might want to start with a language like Python or JavaScript or Java that's easier to learn, and then learn C#. It's not that C# is so difficult. All of these languages, and this is one of the number one take homes that I want you to understand from this talk, is that every computer language that we use today, or I shouldn't say every, almost every computer language that we use today commonly is all based on C. C is like the great-great-grandfather that all of these languages owe their syntax and everything to. So what that means is they're all related. That if you learn Python, if you learn JavaScript, if you learn Java, you learn PHP, you look at C#, they all owe their heritage to C. So that means there's going to be similarities between all of them. So learning JavaScript, you learn these patterns, you learn these functions and methods and things like that, and variables that are very easy. And then when you go to C#, it's easy to make those connections. Oh, this looks just like JavaScript, right? It's just a little bit different. Ashley mentioned in the comments that she does a lot with Unity, and she definitely recommends, that's for game development. Unity is amazing, and they use C# in it. It used to be that you could do JavaScript or C# in Unity. They've started to do away with the JavaScript there and really push the C#. We also teach a course in that. In December, we have a game development course. That's really, really awesome. But anyway, for game development, C# is really the number one way to go. But again, maybe you want to learn a different language like JavaScript first. And Unity still does have some support for JavaScript, so you can learn JavaScript, still do some game development, especially in the older versions of Unity, and then jump into C# from there. When you start to move to the right-hand side of this chart, things get a little bit messier, right? There's all different languages. For Like for mobile development, you can learn Swift or Objective-C or now Flutter or Java for Java or Kotlin for Android development. But notice JavaScript here. Using React Native, you can build for any of the platforms, any of the mobile platforms. For desktop, a lot of people use Java or C#, but also JavaScript is becoming really popular on desktop using technology like Electron and others. For front-end web development, there's only one choice. JavaScript is the only choice for front-end web development. You need JavaScript. That's what it's for. If you want your website to be interactive in any way, shape, or form, you need JavaScript. When you get into the back end, they use Python, they use PHP, we developers, C#, JavaScript, there's a ton of others, but in recent years, JavaScript has really become very big. It used to be that PHP dominated, but now JavaScript is taking over, and almost 50% of backend development now is done in JavaScript. And then, so to be a full stack developer, you could either learn some combination, or you could just learn JavaScript, because you can now use JavaScript on the front end and the back end. So you've heard me say JavaScript, JavaScript, JavaScript. That's not unintentional. If you look at almost 3/4 of this graph here, you can cover it all with JavaScript. And if you throw in the fact that you can use it for game development, as we said before, and honestly, you can use it for data analytics and machine learning, it's just not the best tool for it. But most of the machine learning and data analytics I've done has been in Python recently, but I've actually done plenty of it. I'm working on a machine learning app right now that we're building out in JavaScript. So JavaScript can cover almost your entire basis here. So with that said, what are the most popular languages? No surprise, JavaScript has been the #1 language for the past 7 years. If you ignore the HTML, CSS, and SQL here, the second most popular is Python. But Python is exploding. It's becoming increasingly more popular. And it's actually one of the simpler but more powerful languages. JavaScript, Java, and Python are 3 of the more easy languages. Another one is Ruby, but you notice it's not even up here. It didn't even make the top chart here of the most popular languages anymore. It was for a minute really popular, but it's not as scalable as JavaScript. So it's kind of become, it exploded in popularity and now it's fizzling. So it doesn't even make this chart. Another one that's on the decline is PHP, as I mentioned. So Java and PHP are on the decline, which means if you're just starting out in your career, you might not want to jump into languages that are dying, right? You might want to take on languages that are more on the rise, like Python and JavaScript. So another way to look, this was the most popular languages that professional developers and non-professional developers are using to date. But if you look at what are the top languages in terms of salary or in terms of job openings, look at what falls into the top 3: Python, JavaScript, Java, right? Now these are a little skewed because these aren't just junior developers. These are at all levels, right? It's the median or average salary for all levels in that field, and the job openings as well, right? So if you look at Python, are these entry-level positions? Are there 50,000 entry-level positions? Not a chance, right? There are 50,000 positions. So it gives you a sense of how big the field is in terms of job openings. There's a lot in these, in Python, Java, and JavaScript. You have a lot of job openings. But for entry-level positions, you're more likely to find them here, right, in JavaScript than in any of the others. So as I mentioned, Python is growing very rapidly due to the accessibility of machine learning and data analytics using Python. JavaScript is used across all the industries, and Java is really great. It's taught at a lot of the universities. It was, it's taught, I know that a lot of coding classes for kids are teaching Java because it's easy to learn. And it's a great language, but its popularity has now peaked, and it's on a slow decline. So all of this, I'm throwing all this information at you, but if you're still like, whoa, I don't know where to start, my recommendation for most people is start with web. It's where there's the most jobs. It's the easiest to develop for. It's the easiest to deploy and see your changes and do rapid development. Whereas something like building a game could take you years. Building a mobile application could take a year. Building a website could take a day or a week, and you can get it up and running and build upon it and see your changes rapidly. So it's a very easy, good place to start. And with the web, your answer is JavaScript, right? For the front end, your JavaScript is the way to go. JavaScript was, first released in 1995 by Mozilla for what was then called Netscape Navigator, which you guys probably now know as Firefox. And one thing I love about JavaScript, there's a lot I love about JavaScript as a language, but one thing I love is its fluidity, and it's very unopinionated. It allows you to be as unstructured or as structured as you want, which some languages really force tight structure, and some languages have a little bit looser structure. JavaScript will play in either playground. And, it used to be us old timers, we were only using functional programming. And then somewhere in the 90s, they came out with this whole new thing, object-oriented programming. And that was all the rage for 20 years. And then in the last 5 years, there's been this push back to functional programming. In fact, when I first heard the term functional programming, I was like, what the heck is that? And my junior developers were explaining it to me, and I'm like, oh, we used to just call that programming, right? And it's like old school programming. But JavaScript doesn't care. It's like, oh, you want to use functional? Great, use functional. Oh, you want to use object-oriented? Use object-oriented. And so it's great. It's very flexible. It's used widely on all devices globally. You can't find a device that doesn't run or support JavaScript in some way these days. So you can use it for the front end natively. You can use it on the back end now, running it on servers, running it on the cloud, using technology like Node, which I'll talk about in a second. Also, when you look to the cloud, which is something that you should be doing if you're looking for jobs in South Florida, understanding cloud is really important. AWS, Google, Firebase, Azure, etc. And you look there, and JavaScript's what's running in these cloud functions almost exclusively. On the mobile, I mentioned you can build using React Native. So you can build a front-end website using React and recycle most of that code to build your mobile app using React Native. Use that same code on the desktop using Electron. It's beautiful. So you can kind of build one code base and deploy it everywhere. And that's really, really incredible. And it makes your team more agile for those of you like Ken who were at my talk last night, agile is really important. And it's also a skill that's very much needed. And it's more of a methodology. It's not a programming language, but agile methodology is very important. And it means that your team is one of the pieces of the whole agile framework is your team being able to do everything across the whole gamut, build a feature out on your front end of your website, on the back end, the cloud, on your mobile and desktop apps, etc. So being able to slice through that. Well, if your team is doing JavaScript and all of these things are built on JavaScript, it's very easy to do that with a single team. So a lot of companies are moving in that direction. And it really happened since 2009 when Node came out. And Node it allows you to run JavaScript everywhere, right? When JavaScript came out in 1995, it needed to run in the browser. That's the only place you could run JavaScript. You needed the browser. At the time, you needed Netscape Navigator to run it, and then it quickly went across all browsers. But up until just 11 years ago, you needed a browser to run JavaScript. And then Node comes out and says, no, now you can use JavaScript everywhere. And now in the past 11 years, JavaScript has exploded, and you could see it's now the #1 programming language worldwide. Building from JavaScript takes a lot of work to build out an entire application, website, or whatever. So oftentimes we use what are called frameworks or libraries, where it saves you thousands of hours of work. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use pieces, recyclable code that people have already written that already institute best practices. So if you try and build it yourself, it might take you thousands of hours to get to where this library is, but they already have it using best practices. So unless there's some real reason you need to do it yourself, using these frameworks, using these libraries are an incredible way to go. And not only does it save you time and help you build out your application faster and using best practices, but also those libraries are often very marketable skills. So what am I talking about in terms of these libraries and frameworks? The most popular one is React, and followed by jQuery, Angular, Vue, and then a little less so Ember and Backbone. Those are really, the real super nerds learn those because they want to learn everything. I say keep yourself focused, learn React. And yeah, Monica says she's heard React's #1. This is from NPM Trends. It looks at how many downloads. And you can see this, it goes back about 5 years. And these are weekly downloads. Here's React in the orange. This is 8 million weekly downloads, right? So 8 million times a week, React is being downloaded. And that just blows away any of the others. So it's very popular. It's very widely used. And so a lot of companies now, what they're doing is they're going full stack JavaScript using something like React on the front end, Node on the back end, because it saves money. It saves time. It makes you more agile. It allows you to have a single team that works across the entire stack. So if you're just getting into coding now, JavaScript is a really good place to start. Now, again, the second slide today said it depends, right? So this is a suggestion, right? So I want to reiterate that using React and using Node are a really good place to learn. You learn JavaScript, then learn React. There's a lot of local use of these technologies. A lot of companies are using this. It's incredibly scalable, and scalability is a huge problem with some of these other technologies like Ruby and PHP. That was one of the big problems. Node scales right off the bat. Widely supported. You can deploy on any platform, even Alexa. Your Amazon Alexa is written in JavaScript, right? You can write very short code snippets and create apps for your Amazon Echo. All right, so that, like I said, that's my suggestion for most people. But what about ... right? There's always people that are going to say but, right? And so, like I said, if you're doing machine learning, Python is the answer, right? If you want to do mobile apps, React Native is a really good place to start. Secondary would be Flutter, but React Native will definitely make you more marketable. So if your goal is to get an app built quickly, Flutter is a good place. If your goal is to learn a skill that's going to make you really marketable, React Native is the way to go. You can build yourself an app faster in Flutter, but React Native will build you a skill that you can use more broadly. For game development, Unity using C# is usually the best place to go. For desktop apps, depending on the kind of desktop app, if it's very graphics intensive, maybe using virtual reality or something like that, Unity is good. But if it's just a basic business application, you can usually build that in Electron. And Electron allows you to use pretty much any technology. It's really great. So there you can leverage your Node and your React if you want. I've built Electron desktop apps that do image recognition and things like this, like all kinds. They have machine learning elements where we pulled Python in. It's really cool, but the interface was done in React. Actually, Mariella's on this call. She helped build those, where she built the interfaces in React. I helped build the middleware in Node, and then somebody else on our team was building the Python aspects, and we were connecting them all. And very, very cool stuff to work with. For web, like I said, React, Node, great place to start. If you want to go multi-platform, and what I mean by that is to build an application where you can deploy it across a whole host of devices. You can do that. It really depends on what devices you want. So if you're really looking again for like a business application that you want to deploy across like Mac, Linux, and Windows, then Electron's good. If you want something that's more like a game where you want to be able to run it on a mobile device, on a PlayStation, on your Samsung TV, your Xbox, your Nintendo Switch, your everything, then Unity allows you to do that. It allows you to build for any platform. But for mobile, again, React Native. So it really depends on what those platforms and what your goals are. So that was my quick and dirty. Again, if you're looking to learn some of these technologies, check out Boca Code, right? It's bocacode.com, or just reach out to me directly, todd@bocacode.com. And, I can help steer you. And whether you take classes from me or you're learning on your own or you're taking classes elsewhere, hopefully I can help you on that journey. So hopefully you guys have lots of questions now, and otherwise that's all I got for you.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, I had one question for you.
Sure.
So you mentioned, I think it was like 6 different languages at one point on the presentation. So you would recommend learning Python as kind of like the first one, and then it would be easier to learn the other ones, or which one is like the easiest to kind of navigate with?
If you're going into data analytics
Okay.
and machine learning, then Python is where to start.
Okay.
If you're doing anything with artificial intelligence, Python is the place to start. For just about everything else, JavaScript is probably a better place to start. So, but some people just really want to learn Python because it's kind of an easy introduction. But what happens is when you learn Python, it's not always, it's easy to learn because you could do so much with a single line of code. It always blows people away when you come from a language like like a C++, or where you write this much code to do one thing, and then you come into Python and it's just one line, and it blows you away. You're like, where has this language been my whole life?
Mhm.
And in that one line of code, it does that one thing, and it picks up your dry cleaning and folds your laundry, and you're just like, what the heck? But then, as easy as it is to learn in some regards, and as simple and powerful as it is, it's sometimes not so clear how to build a whole application from it. So then you get into learning Python frameworks like Flask or Django.
Mhm.
And then from there, you can build out a whole web application. But of course, if you're going to go into web, JavaScript is really a good place to start. But those two, if you're going to learn 2 languages, Python and JavaScript, you can't go wrong with those. The number of jobs, the popularity of them are just soaring. I got a question on private question of what's the best language to learn instead of Java and C++. C++ is, people are still using it, but it's definitely becoming way, 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 way less popular. It's on a fast decline. Java is on a very slow decline. It's just, it's kind of reached its peak and is tapering off. But again, it really depends on what your goals are. And if your goals are to build desktop applications, then it also depends on what kind of desktop applications. So if you're building, let's say, communication software like Slack is written in JavaScript in Electron. But if you're building, if you want to work in the financial tech industry, right? You want to work in banking, they're going to be using C#. They're going to be using .NET, so you can use C# on its own, or you can use C# in a framework called .NET. But if you're really on the Windows and banking side of things, C# is a really good one to learn. Java's not terrible, but in those arenas, definitely it's Java and C#. Yeah, so again, it really depends on what you're looking for. A lot of games used to be written in C++. Now they're in C#. A lot of desktop applications that used to be written in C++ or Java now are C# or JavaScript. So,
right. And I had another question, and this is kind of real life experience. So one of my roommates, he just graduated from college. He's, he studied computer science. He knows about 6, 7 different languages. And the hardest part about finding a job, or even if you're transitioning to a new job, is they always ask for experience. Oh, you're qualified, but I wish you had more experience. But it's hard because you're transitioning roles, or you're just out of college. What are some roles that you could suggest for these types of people? Or how do you practice or be consistent and prove that you have value?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Monica. Really, that's the best question I've been asked in a while.
Wow.
In some regards, it's not so easy, right? There are certain fields in computing that I think it's even more difficult. So, for example, if you look in cybersecurity, there are a ton of jobs in South Florida. There are a ton of jobs everywhere. But I'm very tied into, and this is, Nikki was asking about the jobs in South Florida. There's so many jobs in South Florida for cybersecurity, but in cybersecurity, you need to be able to secure a network, secure an app, respond quickly to threats. If you're hiring somebody to do that, you want somebody who's experienced. You want somebody who's been doing this for years, right? You don't want somebody who's fresh out of school or who just got their certificate in cybersecurity. So that's an area where it's very difficult. And what you need to do, there's 2 paths for that, and then I'll come back to everyone else. There's 2 paths that I see for that. Either you need to get a job where you're working with a senior person, and this applies across the board. Either work with somebody who's more senior that's willing to take you on as a mentor. And I used to do that all the time for developers. I would always prefer to hire junior developers that I can help mentor and grow, because I can hire 3 junior developers for the price of 1 senior. And oftentimes they were more productive, right? Senior developers are used to working in managerial roles where you're writing this much code and doing this much other stuff. So having a team of junior developers that you can kind of guide and mentor, but they're the ones doing the bulk of the work. And if you have some, mid-level developers with a little more experience in there that are just workhorses, you can build out a team like that. And I think that pre-COVID, there was a lot of opportunities for junior developers because of COVID. It's really screwed that job market up, at least temporarily. And the reason why is because, at least my personal take on it is, as a business owner and as a senior developer, I will hire a ton of junior developers if I can be literally in the room with them.
Mhm.
If I can oversee them and I could walk around and help them, you need to remove all the barriers of communication. And then you can really mentor and work with them and see them grow. With COVID, we're all remote. And it's very hard to mentor somebody over Zoom,
Mhm.
right? You know, Mariella and I, we do, you know, we code review for each other. We meet regularly, but it's not the same as when we were in the office together. And, you know, she'd come over with her laptop or I'd walk over to her. It's a whole different dynamic being remote. And there are a lot of teams that function well remote, but it's harder, I think, right now for you know, and that's why, like, I see companies like Office Depot, they were hiring, you know, at all levels, COVID hit, and now they're only hiring senior people.
Mhm.
They don't have any openings right now for anyone, any juniors, and it's a complete shift. And so it's a little bit tough. But so what do you do, right? So if you're say in cybersecurity and you're trying to get that experience, what you do is you take on a developer position, right? You use your other skills, but try and weave security into that position so that I love your dog there. So
Oh, no.
that over your career, like the early stages of your career, you weave the security into your other position so that when you go, you know, a few years down the road, you could say, yeah, I've been doing security as part of my job. And then they're more likely to hire you. You got to prove yourself.
Right.
On just regular development side, um, you really need, you know, you can do freelance work to
Mhm.
gain experience. You can find agencies like the Silver Logic or Boca Code's apprenticeship program where they hire juniors, mentor them, and help them gain experience. I think that Peak Activity is even doing that as well. Peak and Silver Logic are two local local software development companies that I've seen take on junior developers and mentor them and train them, and we're doing that as well at Boca Code. Um, so yeah, that's does that answer your question, son?
Yeah. I mean,
I feel
that
like I
definitely.
had something else and I'm missing it, but
Well, no, maybe just um, you know how like when you want to improve your writing skills, they say, okay, practice writing or blogging. Like, is there maybe like games online or course? Well, not courses, but like, you know, kind of like gamification for learning how to code.
yeah, for somebody who's learning, there's so many resources. You know, typically the one of the best ways to learn coding is to start with those online resources and get yourself familiar, then
Mhm.
go to like a code school where you can dive deep and really learn everything and put it all together, because those pieces are hard to put together into a really cohesive picture, and that's what the boot camps do. Even in the university, you're taking these courses that are not necessary. You know, somebody designed the curriculum at the university to be somewhat cohesive, but then you're taking different electives and you have different instructors, and they're not all tying it all together necessarily for you. Whereas at a boot camp, at a code school, it's all being presented as a single cohesive unit. Here's how you get from A to Z and find a job and everything. But then, you know, like your friend who you said who's learned 7 languages at the university and is now looking for a position, but they all require experience. That's when you stop doing the tutorials, you stop doing the games online, and you start building real projects. Right?
Okay.
There's nothing better than actually building a real project, whether it's for yourself or contributing to an open source project. That's also really useful because now you're working with other people, or finding projects in the community. Like something that I know Ashley is really passionate about and has done a lot is to do, like, you know, coding for good and charity work, where you can do coding for organizations and things that really have the need but don't necessarily have the money. So there's a lot of ways to build up that experience, but there are also plenty of companies that are eager to hire, skilled junior developers, whether it's out of code school or out of university. And as somebody who's built those teams up in the past, I like to have people coming from different backgrounds, right? I'd love to have code school students and university students because they have different types of training and they have different, different backgrounds. So it diversifies the team in that way. So Nikki also asked, she said, Nikki asked the question about local jobs here in South Florida. What languages are more common and less common here compared to other parts of the country? That's also a really good question, Nikki. That there are some of these like more esoteric languages like Go, for example, or Rust, or even Ruby, that out in Silicon Valley are more popular, and out west they're more popular with some of the big startups there. And you get these companies, these tech companies that are using all these different languages and integrating all these things, whereas here in South Florida we kind of stick with some of the basics, right? The ones that I said, the JavaScript, the C#, the Java, the Python, right? Those are the ones that are really, React is extremely popular, but there's also a lot of Angular here as well. There's I know a lot of people in the community really like Vue, and there are jobs in it, but I think more likely you're going to find a job in React or Angular. Those are some of the JavaScript frameworks. But yeah, it depends. Like in some of the more corporate type environments, like financial tech or like healthcare, you see more of like the C# and the Java. And then in more of like the startup culture, the smaller companies, you're seeing more of the JavaScript and the Python. And Nikki said, healthcare is huge here in South Florida too, and growing every day. What is your advice for those who are looking to get into coding but also want to stay current? Yeah, so Nikki, I think that's, if you want to get into coding but stay current, then learn JavaScript and React, right? Learn Python. And I think, those are probably the top three that are the most current without going bleeding edge. And that's, I know I've lost count how many programming languages I've learned over the years. It's dozens and dozens. It's very easy once you have a really solid foundation. It's easy to learn other languages because they're all the same. It's just slightly different rules, slightly different syntax. So learning like one or two really well is a good way to make sure that you have that solid foundation. And then you see all these languages coming out all the time, and they have these bursts of popularity. Some of them end up sticking around for a long time, some of them don't. So I don't like to jump. I'm not a bandwagon jumper with this, because if you can learn, somebody comes out, oh, I got this language and it's going to kill JavaScript is dead, long live language X. And then you're like, oh my god, I got to learn language X. And then there's no jobs, nobody's using it. A year later, people have forgotten all about language X, and everyone's still using JavaScript. So I don't like to jump onto those, but out in California, you see companies jumping on those and using them, and you get these whole big applications. So, but we don't do that here as nearly as much in South Florida. So Leonard said he moved to Florida a few years ago and spent 20 years doing desktop dev, support, maintenance, etc., with SQL and Visual Studio in the Boston market. And now he's doing some consulting to see where the software development is going. Right. So he's happy to discuss with anybody if they want, that, to get some of that perspective. Thanks, Leonard.
Awesome. All right. Does anybody else have any more questions? Let me check social real quick. All right. So it looks like there's no more questions on social. Todd, do you have anything else you'd like to share or want to mention?
Just please, if you want to, whether you've been coding for decades and want to just, refresh or learn something new, or you're brand new to tech, come check us out at Boca Code. We have got great introductory courses, and as well as really cool, advanced courses if you want to learn React or Python or Django or something, to add to your skill set. So come check us out.
Yeah.
Join us on Slack and check out our website, and love to see you around and be there for the next free workshop too.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Todd. And we will
Thanks,
be
everyone.
sending out a follow-up email to all the attendees as well with this video and a few more information about Boca Code.
Awesome. Thanks,
All right.
Monica and Nikki. Thank you.
Yes. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Bye.